Do you see it? Do you see it down in those wood chips of my neighbor's blueberry patch? Yeah, that's a morel mushroom, one of my favorite wild foods of the springtime.
He looks like a little gnome, doesn't he?
Hey, welcome to Haphazard Homestead. I'm Holly Chris. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you get to see this morel mushroom. It's gonna be delicious. This is a special kind of morel. It's a landscape morel, the Morchella importuna. It grows in suburban and urban areas, especially where people have put down cardboard and wood chips. And that's exactly what my neighbor and I did the year before. We put down cardboard and wood chips to help keep down the weeds and the grass from around her blueberries when we found this and a couple of other little morels. When I take this mushroom back into the kitchen, I'll show you how to tell that it's a morel, and in particular a landscape morel. While we're out here though, take a look at that mushroom stem and how wrinkled it is. And then look at the brown top of that mushroom with all those pits. A morel is special because the mushroom spores come out of those pits. And look at the arrangement of those pits and how organized they are, with those narrow ridges going up and down in a very organized vertical way. It almost looks like a set of ladders going all the way around that mushroom cap. That's a special pattern that's distinctive about the landscape morels. This one is especially big and beautiful.
My hand's 9 inches. That's a good 7 inches top to bottom. That is one big morel, isn't it? Look at that.
When it comes to other kinds of morels, people sure seem to argue a lot whether they should cut the morel off or whether it's okay to pull it out of the ground. With these landscape morels, it doesn't matter at all, because they don't usually come back after the year that you find them. They're not a morel that comes back in the same place over and over again. You can see here where the mushroom came up out of the ground. The rest of the fungus is still there, down in the wood chips and the cardboard, breaking them down. That makes nutrients available for plants like those blueberries.
Here were 2 others I saw. That one's a little old, but it's still good. It's not soft. You can see it's darker color. It's older. And then this one, that's more of the size that's typical, something like this. You can see they're hollow. The cap attaches to the stem, the Morchella importuna.
Morel mushrooms keep really nice in the refrigerator for a few days in a paper sack. So that gave me time to go out and find a wild plant of the springtime that I really like to eat, and that's stinging nettles. These stinging nettles are the ones that are native to North America, the Urtica gracilis, the American stinging nettle. You can see how those jagged leaves with their serrated edges attach to the stem just opposite of each other, like your arms. And you can see how those stems, they may look square, but really that's just grooves and ridges going up and down the stem. One nice thing about these native stinging nettles is that they have a lot fewer stinging hairs on them than the European species. And even though they have stinging hairs on their stems and on the underside of their leaves, if there are any little hairs on top of the leaves, they're not the stinging kind.
You can see these plants are all taller than about a foot. If they were a foot tall, I would just cut them off at the ground level. But now they've gotten a lot taller. But they aren't flowering yet. You can see they're not flowering yet. They're still growing. So I can come in here and harvest just the tips. If I grab them like this, they don't hurt me because their needles are right underneath. They're on the back side of that leaf, right in there. That's where the little hairs are at. And so if I brush up against the hairs on the back side or the needles on the back side, then I'm going to get it all right along here.
Everybody has a little different sensitivity to those compounds in the stinging hairs. And I have a different reaction depending on what part of me gets hit. My fingers are not so sensitive, but the back of my hand is really sensitive.
So I can come in here like this. You don't even really need a glove, and just do that and get the tips.
I am not that careful or coordinated, so for me a pair of gloves is a lot better than trying to do this with bare hands. I made a mistake and only brought 1 glove, so I paid for this, as you'll see. I think that what matters more is that I'm using a knife instead of scissors. I like using a knife because then I can tell where that stem is really tender. All I have to do is just touch it with the knife, and if it cuts, then that stem is going to be tender enough for good eating. Harvesting stinging nettles this way, it doesn't take very long to get a good mess of greens. It only took a few minutes to fill this basket. Although I did pay the price, you can see those little welts there on the back of my hand. They went away in about 20 minutes though, so that's not so bad. Back in the kitchen, I do go through all the plants that I've picked just to make sure that there's nothing in there that I don't want, and that includes insects, and to make sure that the plants I've got are in good condition. I like using tongs because those stinging hairs are still active. This is a good chance to take a close look at the hollow stem of the stinging nettles, and it's a good chance to take a look at those little stinging hairs. They're like little hypodermic needles. They're filled with compounds like histamines and formic acid. That formic acid is the same compound that's in ant bites. All it takes, though, is a few seconds in boiling water, and all that stinging problem goes away. That's so easy to do. And that water left over from blanching makes a good tea, too. When it's cooked like that, you can touch it all you want. You won't get hurt by that at all. Just straight up greens. That is just so good. To use these stinging nettles, I don't need to do anything complicated. I'm just going to chop them up into tiny little pieces and then set them aside while I get back to that incredible Landscape Morel. There is my little friend, but let's take a look at him. He's been in the refrigerator a couple of days, so he's a little dry, but he's in great shape. You can see here why you might want to cut off the morel mushrooms out in the field. Look at all that dirt and debris that I've brought back into the kitchen. But I wanted you to see this. That's actually cardboard. That's where that was stuck into cardboard. Can you see that? This is what makes it an importuna. See how it's just like a ladder. These rows are parallel here. Take a look at that. Now this isn't parallel rows, but that happens. In general, you can see there's a lot of parallel rows, and then it has just steps like a ladder. There's really nothing else that looks like that. And then you can see that the cap, or this, is attached to the stem. There's no free hanging things here at all. I could just cut them into a bunch of pieces, but what I want to try to do is just have them like a little steak. And here's another part of identifying morel mushrooms. When you cut them in half like this, they are completely hollow, both the cap and the stem. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Isn't that cool? That's the way they look. Do not nibble on a morel. This is one mushroom that absolutely has to be cooked. Morels can really make people sick if they're not well cooked. Now, because I didn't cut this mushroom off at the stem when I was outdoors, it's got soil and grit on it. Some people have a strong feeling about not washing their morel mushrooms. They think it reduces the flavor. I disagree. I can't tell any difference. In fact, dehydrating morel mushrooms is a standard way to preserve them, and to reconstitute them, you just soak them in water. So I've never found it a problem to wash my morel mushrooms. If you feel different, let me know in the comments below. This is so simple to make, but I want to be sure that my morel steak cooks all the way through. So I keep everything on a low heat in my skillet and give it all plenty of time to cook. After only a couple of minutes, the juices from that morel mushroom start coming out and mixing with that melted butter. That's gorgeous. I'm just going to put the lid back on, let them keep cooking. They're just like all other mushrooms. They shrink up a little bit. They're not as big as they were. They're getting a little crispy now. I'm going to put these other little morels right in here. I'm going to put my nettles right in all that beautiful morel juice. Oh yeah, that's going to be delicious. You can tell it's cooked all the way through. They just kind of change their color. Now I want to make a poached egg on top of these stinging nettles. Alright, let's see how this is going. Oh yeah, that's setting up pretty good. A little salt, a little pepper, and some water to finish cooking that egg. Give it some steam. There we go. It's just about ready. Oh, there it is. That's beautiful. Let's take a taste, and I'll give you an overall review, too. Holy smokes, that's good. That's a nice, chewy, substantial mushroom. That is wonderful. Morels do not taste like grocery store mushrooms. Oh man, that was delicious. Morel mushrooms have a tang and a chewiness. If you get big ones, leave them big. They're like steak. They're so good. Holy smokes. Morels, stinging nettles, perfect combination. I hope things are going well at your place. Thanks for watching. Bye.